Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, hockey fans. It is a very, very comfortable 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit in clear and bright Bridgewater, Nova Scotia today. My name is Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to the Thursday, April 21st edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. We finally hit double digits in the temperature. It's almost like it's starting to feel like spring. As per usual, we had a 4-pack of games on the slate last night, including our first elimination game. Dun dun dun. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the Washington Capitals in Philadelphia, taking on the Flyers in Game 4 of that series. Washington coming in with a 3-0 stranglehold, but Philadelphia holds on to fight another day. Flyers win this game by a score of 2-1. Shots were 32-25 for the Capitals in the losing effort. Washington now leads the series 3-1. The Flyers turned to Michael Neuwirth in net. We talked about it a little bit yesterday and whether or not that should have happened, or whether you hang those losses and those performances on Steve Mason. I'm not sure that this means that they hung it on Steve Mason, but just that the Flyers were desperate for something. So the Flyers make a goaltending change, they go to Michael Neuwirth, and ultimately, it works out for them. Third time was definitely the charm. The game opens up here with major physicality, lots of hits going both ways. What weren't really going both ways were the chances. There were very few chances either way in this first period. Chorney, though, taking an early interference penalty on Cousins, sends the Flyers to the power play, and they connect, and it is the Ghost Bear. Shane Gostisbehere, 5 minutes and 51 seconds into the first period on the power play. Gostisbehere from Giroux and Simmons on the one-timer. Philadelphia goes up 1-0. Now, Washington did challenge this goal. Very, very, very early challenge. For the first goal of the game, just over 5 minutes into the first period. The goal stands, which means Washington loses their timeout 5 minutes into the game. I don't know whether that really held a huge deciding factor in this game or anything like that, but it's a very interesting call to risk your challenge so early in the game on the game's first goal. Big time physicality continuing in this game. There were lots of hits. This has obviously been a very chippy series, but lots of hits being thrown on both sides of the ice. Couple of chances. It's a very back and forth game at this point. The Flyers are getting the better of the chances for sure. Braden Holtby has to come up and stone Sam Gagner right on the doorstep. Big save for Holtby, keeping this thing a 1-goal game. The Capitals have a great late push in the first period. The Flyers are holding the fort, and they turn around. They start the second period very, very strong. Just 3 minutes and 51 seconds into the second, Philadelphia has now doubled their lead. It's McDonald from Simmons and Shen, second point for Wayne Simmons. Another one-timer from the point. This time McDonald puts it home behind Holtby. Might have been a little bit of a screen there, but really looked like it just beat him. Capitals now down 2-0. What surprised me here was I saw very little pushback from Washington. This whole game felt like Washington was kind of not phoning it in. I think that's unfair, but it really didn't seem like there was any urgency in the Capitals game, and why wouldn't there be? If you can really stomp out your opponent here, finish this thing off in 4, look at the other Eastern Conference series. You're tied 2-2. Let's see, you're 3-1, that might end, but there's another series that's only 2-1. You're going to have some time here to get yourself healthy, to get rested, be comfortable, watch the rest of the playoffs, see what these teams are doing. If you have a chance to do that, why in the world wouldn't you take it? But it seemed like the Capitals just were not taking it in this game. To their credit, Michael Neuwirth has to make a big save. John Carlson, again, he's maybe been the Caps' best player throughout this whole series. Michael Neuwirth does make a big stop on John Carlson's shot from the point. Washington does start a push about middle of the second period. Sam Gagner, interference penalty, interfering with Justin Williams. No damage on that power play. The third period begins. Chances on both ends. They are going a little bit back and forth. The Capitals finally convert on one of these chances. 2:38 into the third period. Washington cuts the lead in half. It's TJ Oshie with his first of these playoffs. Niskanen and Alzner picking up the assists. If you'll remember from yesterday's show, I talked about how Niskanen and Alzner needed to step up in the absence of Brooks Orpik. They both did that, assisting on the Oshie goal. A nice little backhand rebound. It is now a 2-1 game. Washington's cut it in half. And even given how physical the early part of this game was, the hitting even ramps up from that, and actually ramps up quite a bit. Now both teams selling out to block shots, trying to keep this thing as close as humanly possible. There were 0 shots recorded in this game between 3 minutes and 2 seconds and 7 minutes and 53 seconds of the third period. Very back and forth, no quarter given, none expected, and that's just the way that the end of this game really went. The Caps start registering a couple more chances by about the middle of the third period. Neuwirth with another big save on Burakovsky. Neuwirth coming up huge in his first playoff start, I believe, in a couple of years. The Flyers are doing a great job shutting down these dangerous Capitals snipers, the big guns, the big guys for the Capitals. The Flyers paying them extra attention. They hold on to win this game 2-1. Philadelphia ends the game with 28 blocks, 42 hits. They needed to win. They needed to be the more passionate team. They came out and they won the quote-unquote passion game, and it caused them to win the game. Big ups to the Flyers for holding on home ice. That's a great moment for Philadelphia in the memory of Ed Snyder. We're going back to Washington for Game 5. Let's go to the Island for the Panthers and the Islanders, Game 4 of their series. This series currently 2-1 for the Islanders heading into Game 4. Florida with a big 2-1 victory in this game knots this series up at 2, and we finally see a team outshoot a team and win. Florida 29-27, the shot advantage over the Islanders. Thomas Greiss for the Islanders, I talked about him in yesterday's show, how I've been very impressed with him. He gets tested early. 8 seconds into the game, Jonathan Huberdeau with an open wrister. Thomas Greiss has to make a big save, getting himself settled in early. There's a couple of early penalties, a little bit of undisciplined play, which has been, a bit of a hallmark of these playoffs in general. No damage either way on those early penalties. Thomas Greiss gets called upon again, another big save. Nick Bjugstad rushes in, makes a great save on him. Thomas Greiss, he feels like he's locked in, playing a real good game. The back and forth first period, Florida starts pushing right around the 14-minute mark. Again, Thomas Greiss holds the fort. 2 big saves on Riley Smith, who has been killing it these playoffs. Thomas Greiss, he looking good. The Panthers' push continues into the second period, but Luongo is actually tasked this time, making a tough stop on Kyle Okposo. Luongo obviously had a better game here, stopping 26 of 27 shots. He still looks like he's fighting the puck. I don't know what it is. Look, the results are there. I'm not going to argue with 26 out of 27, but he looks like he's fighting the puck. Is this just me? Am I being too hard on Bobby Lou? What do you guys think? If you're watching these games, or I know there's been at least one person in the comment section that has went to Game 3, may have gone to Game 4, but what are your impressions of Roberto Luongo? Does he look like he's fighting the puck? Does he look nervous? If you're watching the game, maybe it's just me. Through the mid-second period here, Florida is very clearly the better team of the two. Matt Martin takes a bad tripping penalty on Nick Bjugstad, sends the Panthers to the power play. 15-18 into the second period, Florida opens the scoring on the power play. It's Teddy Purcell with his second goal of these playoffs. Jágr and Ekblad picking up the assists. A nice little rebound on a scramble play there in front of Thomas Greiss. Jaromir Jágr joins the 200 playoff point club with that assist, and I believe he passed a couple of players on the all-time playoff assists list as well, or tied a couple of players. Can't remember if he tied or passed, but Jágr, that's a major point for him, another career milestone in the career of the great one, the other great one, Jaromir Jágr. Florida gets in some penalty trouble here late in the second period. Alex Barkov and Kulikov taking consecutive penalties for the Panthers just as the Barkov penalty expires. 19:44 into the second period. Islanders on the power play. Last 20 seconds. It's John Tavares with his third of these playoffs. Pulock and Nelson draw the assists. Nice little give and go with Pulock. A wrister. Boom. It beats Luongo. This game is tied heading into the third. First 3 minutes and 30 seconds of the third period, not really a whole lot of action. One shot gets registered. There are only 2 attempts in the first 3.5 minutes. Not a lot of action moving forward. Brock Nelson takes a bad slashing penalty against Huberdeau. 5 shot attempts on that power play. No damage done. But the Isles cannot generate any pressure post power play. Like, they can't generate any kind of pressure after the penalty kill. Florida keeping it going. 9:25 into the third period. Florida with the go-ahead goal. It's Petrovic with his first of the playoffs. McKenzie and Wilson drawing the assists. A nice little wrist shot through a screen. Finds its way home. Petrovic has his first, and Florida is in the lead. Travis Hamonic trying to keep this thing close for the Islanders, making a couple of really great defensive plays. Calvin DeHaan kind of kills that by hooking Wilson. That penalty is killed off. Riley Smith has been great offensively for the Panthers. Everybody knows. Just look at his numbers. He's been unbelievable. Something that nobody is talking about, Riley Smith is also Florida's best forechecker, because every time that puck gets in deep, it's Riley Smith again, taking on one guy, 2 guys, winning battles on the boards. So not only is Smith the biggest offensive producer, but he's also definitely Florida's best forechecker. The Islanders get a break here late. Jonathan Huberdeau, a horrible penalty, an offensive zone hooking penalty. That just makes me cringe as a hockey fan. No damage on that power play. Like, that seemed to be the chance. Like, that was the chance for the Islanders. Thomas Greiss gets pulled with 1:20 left. Basically what this means is the last 3.5 minutes of this period, the Islanders are essentially on a power play. It was a 5-on-4, and then as soon as the power play ends, basically they pull Greiss, so that basically gives them a 6-on-5. So it's basically 3.5 minutes of power play time, and I just said the word basically about 5 times in a row. The Islanders get a late break, very late break in this game. The Panthers ice the puck. Islanders 2 offensive zone face-off wins. The puck gets centered. It stays out of the net, and Florida survives to win this game 2-1. Knots up the series at 2-2. Florida's got the momentum heading home for Game 5. Let's move to the Western Conference now with the Dallas Stars in Minnesota taking on the Wild. Game 4 of that series, which Dallas led 2-1. Dallas with a big 3-2 victory in Minnesota. Shots were 30-22 for Minnesota, and the Stars take a commanding 3-1 series lead. Now, this was another perfect prediction from Bridgewater's Finest. I told you Dallas was going to win. I told you they were going to win 3-2. Bingo bango, there it is. Antti Niemi gets the surprising start for Dallas. I mean, I shouldn't say surprising. It's surprising to me because, like, you're going to change goaltenders when you're up 2-1 in the series. What kind of a message does that send to Kari Lehtonen? If you have to go back to Lehtonen at any point in these playoffs, guess where his confidence is going to be? It's going to be not even in the toilet. It's already been flushed. So that's going to be a concern. So you better hope Niemi doesn't falter, because if he does, now you've got a real problem on your hands. But in any case, Antti Niemi gets a surprising start here in Game 4. Maybe is it an injury concern with Lehtonen? I can't imagine, but in any case, they go to him. The Wild have a big early game push. Lots of attempts. They're trying to throw everything they can towards a cold goaltender. Smart strategy. The Wild are sort of throwing the body, but the hitting in this game was fairly even, especially early in the game. Minnesota controls most of the early first period. They get nothing on a power play, but they are building momentum, certainly building momentum. Howla and Demers get some offsetting on sportsmanlike penalties. Again, stuff that would probably be better off if we got out of the game. Both goaltenders at this point come up with some big reactionary saves. Antti Niemi stones Charlie Coyle. Devin Dubnyk at the other end with a big save on Patrick Eaves. Basically just reactionary. You throw something out, you hope the puck hits it. That's what happened for both Niemi and Dubnyk. 2 very exciting saves. The Stars control most of the late first period, so momentum has definitely pushed into Dallas's side of the ice. No damage really into the second period. Early second period continues to be very back and forth. It's very physical. Minnesota starting to get a couple of extra chances, and 5 minutes and 1 second into the second period, Minnesota breaks the deadlock and opens the scoring. It's Jason Pominville. He's been great for the Wild. His third goal of these playoffs. Nino Niederreiter and Haula draw the assists. Pominville deflecting the Niederreiter shot. It's in the back of the net. Pominville scores. Minnesota up 1-0. And nothing kills momentum faster than a penalty. Matt Dumba takes an over-the-glass delay of game penalty. That sends Dallas to the power play, and they waste no time at all. 9 minutes and 11 seconds into the second period, Dallas on the man advantage. It's Ales Hemsky with his first goal of these playoffs. Demers and Russell draw the assists. They cycle the puck around real well. Hemsky just slaps it home behind Dubnyk. That's the goal. Dallas has now tied this game. But we barely get a chance to breathe before Minnesota takes the lead back. 10 minutes and 14 seconds into the second period, barely a minute later, you don't even have a chance to sit back down in your seat. Charlie Coyle with his first of these playoffs, Zucker drawing the assist. You had a turnover, a transition rush, and Coyle basically just scores. Remember those goals in NHL 95? When you just skate up to the goaltender and you press the pass button and it beats them like every time. It was like the biggest glitch in that game. That was basically what this goal was. Charlie Coyle rushes in and it's like he presses the pass button. I don't even know if he had control of the puck. And Niemi just falls. Niemi just flops over like he's a fish on a boat. And it just, the puck just trickles in. I honestly don't even know if Coyle shot it. But in any case, it's in the back of the net. Minnesota's got themselves a lead. And nothing kills momentum faster than another penalty. Nino Niederreiter with a slash on Johns for the Stars puts Dallas back on the power play. 13:24 into the second period, barely 3 minutes after Minnesota had taken the lead. It's a tie game again. Dallas on the power play. It's Patrick Eaves, his second goal of these playoffs. Russell and Spezza drawing the assists. Eaves deflecting Russell's point wrist shot. Dallas has now tied this game, both of their goals coming off of stupid Wild penalties, both goals coming on the power play. The Stars continue their push. They take a momentum-killing penalty. But as that penalty expires, 18:51 into the second period, almost into the last minute, Dallas with a push, and Jason Spezza gives the Stars the lead. His second goal of these playoffs. Demers and Ben drawing the assists, deflecting the centering pass from Demers. Actually, it just kind of hits Spezza. But hey, again, you take him where you can get him. Spezza's got his second of these playoffs. The Stars have a lead, their first lead of the game. The third period starts off all Wild. And actually, the whole third period was basically the Wild just demanding to tie this game. They had to start feeling like their playoff lives were at stake. They push very hard. 0 shots for Dallas until about 4 minutes into the third period. So that just goes to show you there how good the Wild were early on in this period. Minnesota pulls Devan Dubnyk with about 2 minutes left in the period, and Antoine Roussel takes a double minor high sticking penalty at 18:36. This is a 6-on-4. Johnny Oduya loses his stick. It's essentially a 6-on-3.5. Minnesota sends 5 attempts at the net in the last minute. Dallas survives. Antti Niemi holds the fort. Dallas holds on to win this game 3-2 to take a commanding 3-1 series lead, heading back home for Game 5. And the late game last night saw Game 4 between the Kings and the Sharks in San Jose. The Sharks leading this series 2-1, and the Sharks with a big 3-2 victory on home ice in Game 4 to take a commanding 3-1 series lead, heading back to Los Angeles for Game 5. Shots in this game were 29-28 for the hometown Sharks. Another very physical start to this game, 8 hits recorded in the game's first 3 minutes. The Kings feel like they have the better of the early play. They got a couple of quality chances, no damage really. Physicality continuing really throughout the whole first period, though Jonathan Quick does make a great save, stones Patrick Marleau on a 2-on-1. That was probably the Sharks' best chance of the first period. The Kings finished the first period really, really strong here. 5 of the last 6 hits in the period were recorded by the Kings. They blocked 2 shots late in the period, not letting anything through for San Jose. Jeff Carter, unfortunately, opens the second period with a roughing penalty against Marc-Edouard Vlasic. The Kings do manage to block 3 more shots, but when one does get through, 2 minutes and 9 seconds into the second period, San Jose has opened the scoring. It's Brent Burns with his second goal of these playoffs. Ward and Vlasic drawing the assists. A nice little one-timer right from the face-off dot. Brent Burns buries it behind Quick. San Jose has a 1-0 lead. And no better way to kill your momentum than taking a penalty. I'm going to keep saying it until it stops happening. Matt Nieto takes almost an immediate tripping penalty. He actually tripped Jonathan Quick, which I thought was a little bit funny because you see a big goaltender like that, you kind of like to see him flop around. So he takes a tripping penalty on Quick. 7 more attempts thrown at Martin Jones. Jones is still holding the fort. Joel Ward then proceeds to high stick Drew Doughty. 4 more attempts. Jones stoning Drew Doughty on the one-timer. Big save there for Martin Jones. This time now the Kings go down a man. Scuderi with a tripping penalty on Tomas Hertl. The Sharks go on the power play one more time. And one more time, 9 minutes, 21 seconds into the second period. Sharks' second power play goal of the night. It is Joe Pavelski with his 4th goal of these playoffs. I told you Pavelski had to be better. Boom, power play goal. Thornton and Marleau draw the assists on that goal. That goal pretty well came right from Wayne Gretzky's office. Thornton down behind the net in the office, puts it out front for Pavelski. He pounds it home. Pavelski scores the goal, which doubles the Sharks' lead. Game looks like it really opens up here after that second goal. The chances even up. The Kings definitely have the physical edge at this point in the game. Schenn takes a roughing penalty on Joe Thornton. That was Luke Schenn. 5 chances for San Jose on that power play. Martin Jones has to make another big save after the power play on Lewis to end the second period. The Sharks go back to the power play at the beginning of the third period, a high sticking penalty. The Sharks have 2 power play goals so far, make it 3. A minute and 40 seconds into the third period, San Jose with their 3rd power play goal of the game. It's Marleau with his first of the playoffs from Couture and Burns. A nice little deflected backhander. That gets in the net. They are up 3-0, and they have solid control of this game until a minute later, 2:49 into the third period, when the Kings get on the board. It's Lewis with his second of the playoffs from Schenn and Versteeg, deflecting the Schenn point shot. This one was challenged. Should this goal have counted? This is the one where he's essentially sitting on Martin Jones's blocker side shoulder. And I mean, it does make it pretty well impossible for Jones to make the save, but the argument can be made that Brent Burns put him there. So it's hard to really say one way or the other. There's a compelling argument on either side. What side of the fence do you sit on that particular goal? Should this goal have counted? The challenge ended up failing, so clearly the NHL thought it was a good goal. The Kings are on the board. It's 2-1. The massive Kings pushback continues at this point. The Sharks, for the rest of the game, only have 9 shot attempts for the whole rest of the third period. We're talking about like the early third when this goal happens and when this pushback is occurring. Only 9 attempts through a whole period. That doesn't tend to be good enough. The Kings throw out 3 straight hits, and it's another case of physicality breeding offense. 6:44 into the third period. The Kings cut the deficit to 1. It's Luke Schenn with his first goal of these playoffs. Kopitar and Gaborik drawing the assists. Nice little wrist shot through a screen. It gets through Martin Jones. Kings have all the momentum at this point. After that 3-2 goal, the Kings throw 15 attempts towards Jones. The rest of the game, the Sharks get down and block 6 of them, and the Sharks hold on. And I mean hold on, because the Kings definitely had the better of the third period. Pretty well the entire third period, certainly after the Sharks' third power play goal. But special teams was the story of this game. I mean, you put the Sharks on the power play that many times and they beat you 3 times, you got nobody to blame but yourself. You gave them those opportunities. Sharks win. Sharks take a 3-1 series lead back to Los Angeles for Game 5. Los Angeles, very difficult building to win in. Sharks have already done it twice. What do you think? Do you think they can make it 3? So before we tee up tonight's games, just a couple of news and notes from around the league. Andrew Shaw, as we spoke about yesterday with his gestures and his anti-gay slur that he threw out on the ice, which he then later said, I don't even know what I said. How do you not know what you said? But in any case, Shaw is now suspended for Game 5, fined $5,000. The fine I'm perfectly okay with. Matter of fact, fine him more. Like $5,000, fine him more. These are pro athletes. Fine him 10, fine him 20. Set the precedent, right? But the suspension, I'm not 100% sure I'm okay with. I mean, look, it's a strong message by the league. It is. No disagreement there. It's a strong message from the league saying, we're not going to tolerate this shit. We can't. It's 2016. We cannot tolerate this. But Game 5 is an elimination game for the team of the player who just got suspended. So it's not the same issue as like a Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, where Game 4 was an elimination game, but he damn near physically injured a player. It's a weird slippery slope. What do you guys think about the Shaw punishment? Do you think the suspension is justified? Do you think the fine is justified? Should it have been more? Maybe you thought it was too much. What about the suspension? What do you guys think about the whole Andrew Shaw situation? And this, I guess, is more a personal question than anything else. With so many games every night, I mean, you got 4 games every night, and you want to absorb, obviously, as much playoff hockey as you possibly can. So with all these games, how do you guys watch? Now, I mean, obviously, I guess a lot of the listeners out there have some kind of team allegiance in the first round, so you probably just, you could ignore the other games and just watch your team's games. But I guess more specifically for the watchers, the viewers, and my listeners who don't have a team allegiance, like me, I don't really have a team allegiance in this playoff. How do you watch? Do you watch all of one game? Do you try to watch some of every game? I'm finding it difficult, especially where I have to put content together to do a podcast for you guys. I try to watch as much of every game as I possibly can. I'm going back, I'm watching replays. I'm up till 3 a.m. every night. But how do you guys watch? Are you watching all of one game? Are you bouncing around? Are you channel surfing as much as you can? How are you guys watching this year's playoffs? Okay, kids, we've got 2 elimination games on tap for tonight, as well as 2 Game 3s, so let's get into them. First of all, elimination games. We'll start in the Eastern Conference. Detroit in Tampa Bay for Game 5 of that series. Detroit down 3-1 on the brink of elimination. This game begins at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's available on CBC in Canada, as well as NBCSN in the United States. Your likely goaltending matchup, one more time, it's going to be Peter Mrazek and it's going to be Ben Bishop. Mrazek looked like he had, he looked vulnerable for the first time in his 2 games. In the last game, Mrazek still played a good game and has put up pretty good numbers. This is a do or die for the Red Wings, and for me, it's now or never for Pavel Datsyuk. I know I've talked about him a lot in these playoffs, but again, no points. Zero points. 15 shots, no points. You don't have to score a goal, but get involved. And I don't know. I'm not giving him credit for being average because he's not an average player. You expect more from a guy like Pavel Datsyuk. And if this is going to be his last playoff especially, you expect more from him. So, I mean, it's now or never for Datsyuk. If he can't perform in Game 5 when his team is on the brink of elimination, well, maybe you belong in the KHL. For the Red Wings in this game, I think it is going to be vital for them to trust Athanasiou. Despite my difficulties pronouncing his name, I certainly am not mispronouncing these numbers. Athanasiou is tied for the 3rd most shots on the Red Wings. He's got 10, and it's in under 10 minutes per game of time on ice. This guy is making the most out of the least amount of time. I think you need to trust this kid. I think you need to move him up. I think you need to give him more shifts. I mean, there's people ahead of him on the depth chart that are doing less than him with up to at least 7 more shifts per game than Athanasiou is getting. this kid needs more ice time because he's performing. And in an elimination game, you have to trust the players that are performing. You don't just trust the ones making the most money or the ones that are the highest on the depth chart. You got to trust the players that are performing. Athanasiou is performing for the Red Wings. Abdelkader for all the give back in the stupid penalties and everything like that. He is performing for this team. You got to trust guys like this in elimination situations. One player I'm going to be watching in this game, and again, I talked about him before, is Jonathan Drouin. I want to see how Drouin's going to follow up his 3-point effort from Game 4. I mean, look, he's still a defensive liability. We talked about it before. He's still a -3. So, I mean, he's still a liability on the defensive side of things. But I think based on the performance, certainly the performance that he gave in Game 4, you can accept the fact that he's a defensive liability. It's still there. He's still learning the defensive aspect of the game, but I'm really going to be watching to see how Drouin follows up that big Game 4. And Ben Bishop is another player I'm going to be paying particular attention to. Ben Bishop just very quietly doing his thing. Very few people talking about him, but he's just back there doing his thing, and he looks like he's having a lot of fun. .937 save percentage, 2.01 goals against. He's having himself a heck of a playoff, and I think the series ends tonight. I'm going to take Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay to win this game by the number that they're currently leading the series by. I'm going to take it 3-1. Tampa Bay wins the series in 5 games. And let's jump around a bit and talk about the late game, the other elimination game that we have tonight. Chicago in St. Louis taking on the Blues. Blues with a 3-1 series lead in this series. The game begins at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. It's available on Sportsnet and NBCSN in the United States. Your likely goaltending matchup is not going to change. Corey Crawford taking on Brian Elliott. Both of these goaltenders have been quite good. Elliott has been just fantastic, has arguably been the best goaltender of these playoffs. As we just mentioned, Andrew Shaw suspended for this game for Chicago due to his exploits at the end of Game 4. And really, I'm not going to talk much about the Blues. I mean, other than the fact that they could probably use a bit of a better penalty kill, or just take fewer penalties, but they could take a bit of a better penalty kill, and they could tighten up the defense because they're giving up a shit ton of shots. Luckily, Brian Elliott is playing out of his mind. But for the most part, they're doing most things right. I mean, their best player is their best player. Tarasenko leads the team in shots and points. So, I mean, he's being their best player and their most dangerous one. They're basically doing most things right to win a playoff series. I've heard some people talking about how Patrick Kane is not performing up to expectations. He's got 4 points in 4 games. I mean, it can't just be Patrick Kane, I guess, is my point there. He's performing at a point-a-game pace. Does he need to be better? Probably for Chicago to survive, but there's other players that need to be better before Kane needs to step up his game, and I'm staring right at Jonathan Toews and Marian Hossa. They need to find a way to get off the schneid. These are guys that are throwing everything at the net, and they haven't gotten the bounces. They haven't been seeing the results yet. They've got to find a way. They have to find a way to get off the schneid, or Chicago is going home tonight. Of note, only 28 teams in NHL history have rallied from down 1-3 in a series to win the series. That's a clip of about 10%, 1 in every 10. I've heard worse odds than that. I mean, it obviously could be better. But, I mean, it could be worse too. Chicago's got a chance. I do think it starts in Game 5. I'm going to give this team the benefit of the doubt because I've seen them do it so many times before. I like Chicago tonight to hang on, at least to hang on, send it back to Chicago for Game 6. I like Chicago to win a very low-scoring, tight game. Let's go 2-1, and let's go in overtime just to get greedy. I think earlier I accidentally said we had a pair of Game 3s. I meant to say we have a pair of Game 4s. But let's look at the early one there. It's Pittsburgh in New York to face the Rangers. Game 4 of that series. Pittsburgh leading the series 2-1. This game begins at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's on Sportsnet in Canada and CNBC in the United States. The likely goaltending matchup, it's probably going to be Matt Murray. He played pretty well. Definitely going to be Lundqvist for the Rangers. I'm just going to stop guessing the Penguins' crease at this point. NHL.com, Dan Rosen, I believe, is reporting that it's probably going to be Matt Murray, so let's just go with the idea that it's going to be Matt Murray. As unstable as the name on the back of the jersey has been, Pittsburgh's goaltending is playing pretty well in these playoffs. 75 saves off of 82 shot attempts in those 3 games so far. That's a .915 save percentage. That's good enough to win. And that's what they've been doing. It's been good enough to win 2 games, up 2-1 in the series. The goaltending's been pretty well, given that I don't think any of these guys know when they're playing. The Rangers, for their part, need to find more offense. They need to find more weapons. There's only one New York Ranger, and you know who I'm going to say it is. It's Derek Stepan, who has 10 or more shots. This is a team that had 5 20-goal scorers and 6 guys that had over 150 shots this season. Of course, Derek Stepan is one of both of those, but guys like Chris Kreider and Rick Nash, and there's people on this team that need to step up and start attempting more shots and start getting more involved in the offense. And one guy I'm going to point the finger at straight in his face is Eric Staal. Eric Staal needs to step up for the Rangers big time. Eric Staal in these playoffs has fewer shots than the number after the negative sign in his plus-minus. He's got 4 shots. He's a -5. That's not good enough. I remember reading an NHL.com article that said Eric Staal is where he belongs in the playoffs. Well, if this is where you belong, show us this is where you belong. So I'm calling out Eric Staal, and based on the way that my call-outs have gone so far this playoffs, probably means Eric Staal is going to have a hat trick. I like the Rangers in this game. I think the Rangers tie it up on home ice to send it back to Pittsburgh for Game 5. I'm going to give it to the Rangers 4-3. Rangers win. And the last game we're going to talk about today is going to be the one that's going to be the hardest game to watch. And not based on what's going to happen on the ice. It's going to be the hardest game to find on television. Anaheim in Nashville for Game 4 against the Predators. This series is 2-1 Nashville. Begins at 8 p.m. Eastern if you can find it. In Canada, this game is only available on FX Canada. So if you're lucky enough to have FX Canada, great. You'll be able to see this game. In the United States, it's only available on the NHL Network and Prime, aside from some regional affiliates. So here's hoping you have a really good digital package, or else you're not going to get to see this game. I'm not. I don't have FX, so I get to miss this one. That'll be fun to piece it together tomorrow. Anyways, Frederik Andersen and Pekka Rinne, your likely goaltending matchup in this game. Andersen really impressed me in Game 3, played himself a really good game. For Nashville, Craig Smith is day-to-day. He's questionable for tonight. He's played pretty well for the Predators so far. He's got 2 points in 3 games with 6 shots, goal and a helper. So he's played fairly well for the Preds. They may be without him tonight. This series has been razor thin. This is so close. Like, we're undervaluing how close this series has been. There's no one in this series that has 4 points or more. And there's only 3 players in this series that have recorded 10 or more shots. I know they've only played 3 games, but these games have been so close to the chest overall. You know what I mean? Like, overall, the series is so close and really could turn on a dime. The penalty kill has been great for both of these teams all series. Anaheim's penalty kill, 92.3%. 85.7% for the Predators. The penalty kill has been great in this series, so that could be an edge. If one of these power plays can start to break through, then that could definitely be an edge, and that could be the only edge you need to win this series. The Ducks need to keep dominating the faceoff dot, 57.4% right now. They're doing very well, although the Preds did get some of that back from the last game. And they need their star players to step up. Getzlaf, Perry, their best players need to be their best players. I like the Ducks to even up the series tonight. I'll take Anaheim 4-2 in Nashville. My 4th goal is probably going to be an empty netter, but I like Anaheim to win this game, tie this series up, sending it back to Anaheim. All right, folks, that's going to do it for the Thursday, April 21st edition of the Bridgewater's Finest 2016 NHL Playoffs podcast. Let me know in the comments section below what you thought of the Andrew Shaw discipline, whether you thought that goal in San Jose, Los Angeles should have counted, should have not counted. Let me know how you're thinking about the podcast. What do you feel? Are you enjoying it? Are you still enjoying it? I see the viewership has gone down a little bit, but I figured that was going to happen as the playoffs wear on. Thursday, April 21st, now in the books. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. I will see you folks again tomorrow.